As a result of the decline of the Assyrian power and influence, the Babylonians and Medes attacked and conquered the Assyrians and divided the empire between them. The city of Babylon, of course, was the capital of the Babylonians and was situated in southern Mesopotamia, which is southern Iraq today, which is on the river Euphrates, about 400 kilometres, about 250 miles south of Nineveh, which of course was the capital of Assyria. Nebuchadnezzar, the king of Babylon, led his forces on several invasions down to Syria, Israel and Egypt, and conquered those nations. So once again, the sword came into the land of Israel. Nebuchadnezzar eventually conquered Jerusalem. He destroyed the city, he destroyed the temple, and he took many Jews captive back to Babylon. Now, there are literally hundreds of references in the Bible to Babylon and various descriptions of the city. For example, in Isaiah chapter 13, we read the words, Babylon the Great, the glory of the kingdoms. Herodotus, the Greek historian, said Babylon surpassed in splendour any city of the known world. It was greater than Nineveh, it was greater than Thebes, and many artists have given their impressions of the city like these ones that I've been showing you. The river Euphrates flowed through the city and massive gates led into it. From all accounts, Babylon was the greatest and the most powerful city of the ancient world. During its heyday, it ruled with such power, it would have been difficult to imagine it defeated and in ruins. And yet, that is exactly what the Bible prophets prophesied at the time. For example, a prophecy in Jeremiah 51 declared that the Medes and the Persians would conquer Babylon and that it would ultimately become a heap of ruins, a dwelling place for wild animals and birds without any human inhabitants at all. History has vindicated Bible prophecy. The Medes and the Persians did conquer Babylon, and the city did ultimately end up a heap of ruins. Over a period of time, a lot of the city got taken apart. This picture is an artist's impression of some of the winged bulls and architecture being removed from the city. The city of Babylon was made mostly out of bricks, millions of them, mostly sun-baked bricks. But many were also glazed with beautiful designs, as we'll see. And over the centuries, the locals and the not-so-local moved in and removed great numbers of the ready-made bricks. They used them to build their own houses and villages. Bricks from Babylon were used to build many villages and towns in the area and the outlying districts. Add to this the ravages of nature, the gradual disintegration of the brick structures, and bit by bit the city crumbled. It got buried by the sands of time. And eventually the time came when it was not even known where the ancient metropolis of Babylon was. And no one knew that the dusty mounds in that area were in fact covering the ruins of that great city. The time actually came when some started to claim that Babylon never ever existed and that the references to it in the Bible were just simply a myth. They were not regarded as historical fact. But as we'll see, the archaeologists eventually uncovered the city, proving the biblical record to be absolutely true. The ruins of Babylon extend over an area of about 850 hectares and constitute the largest ancient settlement in Mesopotamia. This picture was taken of just a small section of the site where excavation had taken place. Excavation of the city started in the 19th century. The pictures taken at the time, like this one, were of course in black and white, and I'll be showing you more of them. These are the remains of paved streets leading to King Nebuchadnezzar's palace. The prophet Daniel, who lived in Babylon, probably walked along this very path when he went to the palace, as we know he did because it is recorded in the book of Daniel. For centuries, people living on the banks of the river Euphrates had dug into the mound for bricks. Most of the villages along that part of the river had been built with them, but the city of Babylon was so great that heaps of bricks still remained. A few Europeans who went to Baghdad saw the dusty mounds of what was called Babel by the locals, and they picked up bricks with strange writing on them, which nobody could read at the time, and they took them home as curiosities. Now, a major excavation began under German auspices in 1899. Robert Calderway, seen here, was in charge of the work. Summer and winter, for 18 years, that is till 1917, excavation took place. Calderway's 200-man crew uncovered city walls, gates, palaces, temples, houses, etc., not to mention stone carvings and cuneiform inscriptions. Calderway was totally dedicated to the excavation of the city. One of his assistants reported that he lived for Babylon and thought of Babylon day and night. Most of what was excavated belonged to Nebuchadnezzar's period of rule, which was from around 626 to 539 BC. Excavations brought to light an outer wall around the city that was 16 to 18 kilometres long. There was also an inner wall made up of two parallel walls. Towers were originally spaced among them. The walls extended 9 metres, about 30 feet underground. There were 9 gates leading into the city and 250 guard towers around the main wall of the city. There were also 9 temples within the city complex. Of the 9 gates that led into the city, the most important one was on the north side, which led into the palace. It was the main gate dedicated to Ishtar, the goddess of love and war. As this drawing shows, the gate was built double to match the 2 walls of the city. This half-size replica of the gate stands at the entrance to the archaeological site at Babylon today. It's only 12 metres, about 40 feet high, but remember, it's only a half-sized replica. When Calderway started his excavations, nothing of the gate was visible above the ground. Brick hunters over the centuries had taken away most of the beautiful bricks above road level. But 12 metres of the lower courses below road level still remained. And this picture was taken on the first day that they started to dig them out, which was on April Fool's Day, 1st of April 1902. You can see the top section sticking out of the ground here. Oh, the light's not working tonight. So much spoil had to be dug out that a railway had to be installed to remove it. The reason for the lower courses being so deep was because the road had been raised by Nebuchadnezzar to a higher level due to a rising water table, which resulted in the lower sections of the gate getting buried. When pictures of the excavation of Babylon, and particularly the Ishtar Gate, were first shown to the more Bible-oriented society back in the early 1900s, they stirred up tremendous interest and excitement. But of course, times have changed since then. There's a lot less interest in anything to do with the Bible today. Calderway shipped back to Berlin, to the Berlin Museum, most of the treasures that he found in Babylon. And these included the remains of one of the Ishtar gateways, which he dismantled and sent back to be reassembled, as you see here. Fortunately, the 12 metres of the lower courses of the gateway were enough for this reconstruction to be made. They were not enamelled or glazed when excavated, but the State Museum in East Berlin colourfully glazed them to represent the original appearance. The gate stands in the museum as a memorial to the glory of Babylon and a witness to the truth of Bible history. According to Nebuchadnezzar's records, the gate was originally guarded by mighty bronze colossi of bulls and dragons. It also had cedar panels and copper inlays. Because there were originally two gates in the Ishtar complex to match the two parallel walls of the city, it was possible to have two reconstructions. This one that you've been looking at here at Berlin, and this one which we saw earlier at the entrance to the site at Babylon itself. The Ishtar Gate was the ceremonial entry to the main part of the city. It was the entrance to the processional way, which went past the royal palace to the temples. You will have noticed that the gate is ornamented with rows of animals, alternating bulls with serpent-headed dragons. 573 animal images decorated the double gateway. The bulls were symbols of Adad, the god of thunder and storms, that is, the weather god. He was a very important god to keep on the right side of course. Babylonians no doubt hoped to achieve this by putting his symbol all over the gate. The serpent-headed dragons are scaly coated and have the double horns of the Arabian horned viper, and the tail terminates in a scorpion sting. They were symbols of the god Marduk, who was regarded as protector god of the city. Marduk is actually referred to in the Bible in Jeremiah 50 verse 2 as Merodach. In this drawing, you can see the Ishtar Gate at the end of the street. This street, which led to and fro from the gate, was called, as I mentioned before, the processional way. And the lower part of the walls that flanked it were clad with beautiful glazed bricks. The scene has been reconstructed in the Berlin Museum, as you can see. The beautiful glazed bricks depict the Babylonian lion. These life-size lions of glazed brick are just over 1 metre high. Robert Caldaway wrote in his book, quote, "They advanced one behind the other, creating an impression of peril." Regarding Marduk, the serpent-headed dragon, there are two references in the Bible, in 2 Kings 20 verse 12 and Isaiah 39 verse 1, to Merodach-Baladan, one of Babylon's kings who was named after Marduk. But until the archaeologists dug up this black marble boundary stone on which the name of Merodach-Baladan is engraved, there was no reference to him outside of the Bible. So the critics had concluded that Baladan was baloney. But the accuracy and authenticity of Bible history was once again vindicated by the spade of the archaeologists. Baladan, by the way, is the figure on the left. Coming back to the processional way, this is a general view of its ruins, which were unearthed by Caldaway and his team. And this is an artist's impression of what it originally looked like. The hanging gardens and palace are on the right, and in the distance on the right is the ziggurat, that is the temple tower. Many great processions would have been witnessed here, like the king and his army returning from victorious campaigns, accompanied with plunder and captives, including Daniel and his 3 friends, who we read about in Scripture. A steady stream of travellers and traders would have flowed in and out of the city each day. During state occasions and religious festivals, the processional way would have been packed with people as depicted in this drawing. In real life, it probably looked something like this. When this structure was unearthed, it had very thick walls, suggesting it was originally a high building. The excavators proposed it may have been the foundation structure for the Hanging Gardens of Babylon. The Greek historian Herodotus says that Nebuchadnezzar created a mountain-like garden to please his wife, who came from the hilly and mountainous country of Persia. She was evidently homesick in the boring, flat plains of Babylon. So Nebuchadnezzar built high terraced gardens to resemble mountains. Most artists' reconstructions have taken their shape from the ziggurat, a stepped or staged building of considerable height, as seen in these artists' impressions. The Hanging Gardens became regarded as one of the 7 wonders of the world. But of all the 7 wonders, they've left us the least in stone and story upon which to build an accurate picture. Reference is made in the Bible to Nebuchadnezzar by name about 30 times, and to the surprise of those who thought it was just a biblical myth, the archaeologists found his name inscribed on walls and stone slabs everywhere, an example of which you're looking at on the screen. And this here is just one of the many bricks found among the ruins stating that Nebuchadnezzar was the builder of the Babylon of his day. The walls in Nebuchadnezzar's palace were decorated with moulded, brightly painted glazed bricks, as now seen on the walls of the Berlin Museum. One is hanging on each wall in the museum beside the Ishtar Gate, each bearing tree and flower designs with lions below. As you can see, there are only 3 lions on each panel. The lions on each wall panel are the same as those which decorated the walls along the processional way. The size of the wall of coloured bricks is indicated by the people standing at the bottom of it in this picture. References in the Bible, particularly in the book of Daniel, indicate the widespread practice of astrology and divination in Babylon. On the screen at the moment is an ancient horoscope that was unearthed by the archaeologists, which actually confirms that. This clay model of a sheep's liver was also found. It's marked off into 50 sections, inscribed with omens and magical formula for the use of diviners. Now, Genesis 10 verse 10 tells us that Babel, that's Babylon, was the first city built by Nimrod in his kingdom after the flood, which makes it the oldest city in the world. And Genesis 11 verse 4 says a tower was built there as well, that is a temple tower or ziggurat, something like what you see on the screen. In 1903, Coldaway and his team found what they believed to be the tower's foundation. The outline of the huge square base of the tower can be seen in this Google picture. Many mounds caused by excavation, not to mention vegetation, due to a high water table in the area being so close to the river Euphrates, can also be seen surrounding the base. The discovery of the tower foundation was heralded as the crowning achievement of Coldaway's excavations. According to Genesis 11, the original builders baked bricks thoroughly and used bitumen for mortar, and this bricklaying technique was confirmed by the findings of the archaeologists. The base is about 90 metres, that's 300 feet square, and the actual thickness of the brick facing was 15 metres, almost 50 feet. This is why the trench is so wide. The original tower, of course, built in Nimrod's day, we're talking here about 2350 BC, was destroyed and rebuilt later. It has in fact been destroyed and rebuilt a number of times. Nebuchadnezzar, though, was the last to rebuild it around about 600 BC. Many artists in the past have given their impressions of what they imagined the tower looked like. These are fairly typical of what they thought the design and shape would be like. Some of them are quite fanciful, as you'll see in the following quick succession of pictures that I'm going to show you. So much for artists' impressions. Calderway also found a little cuneiform tablet belonging to an architect on which was inscribed a plan of a 7-stage tower. 7 squares rose one upon another, and the 7th stage was a cube on the top, like a crown. This drawing is based on the tablet, and on the basis of these details, models such as this have been made to give some idea of what the temple tower really looked like. Here's another one. It was basically a larger version of the ziggurat at Ur, which I showed you in an earlier program. You'll notice that the 7th stage on the top of this one is blue. The reason for this is because an ancient historian stated that the original top of Babylon's tower was composed of blue glazed tiles. According to the tablet, the length, breadth and height of the tower were equal. Now the length of the sides of the base were 90 metres, that's 300 feet, so the tower would have been the same distance in height. Babylon was certainly a great city in her time, as this plan, based on the archaeological research, indicates. As many as 200,000 people could have lived there at the peak of the power and prosperity of the city. Nebuchadnezzar's ambition was to make Babylon the greatest, grandest metropolis the world has ever known, a city that could never be conquered, with a dynasty that would never come to an end. At the time, the city would seem to be impregnable and immortal. It would have been hard to believe that the city could be conquered and destroyed and end up lost in a heap of ruins, no longer able to be identified and her past existence actually denied. Yet, this is what the Bible prophet Jeremiah declared would ultimately happen to this vast and powerful city. When Babylon was in her heyday, the prophet Jeremiah said this, "And Babylon shall become heaps of ruins, a dwelling place for wild animals and no human inhabitants, causing those who pass by to be astonished and hiss in derision." That's Jeremiah 51, verse 37. The events of history have certainly confirmed the accuracy of this prophecy. Babylon clearly became heaps of ruins, and these pictures that we've been looking at demonstrate that. How astonished Nebuchadnezzar and his people would be if they could come back today and see their so-called eternal city. This prophecy in Isaiah 34 verse 11 warned that instead of people possessing Babylon, the cormorant, that's a hawk or a pelican, and the bittern, that's a marsh bird, shall possess it. The owl also and the raven shall dwell in it. This prophecy in Isaiah 13 verse 21 also makes the point that wild beasts of the desert will dwell there, and that the dwellings will be occupied by owls and other birds. The evidence of this is seen in pictures such as this. showing the walls stained with bird droppings as a result of birds nesting in the broken recesses of the city. Animal lairs such as this one can also be seen where once beautiful palaces adorned the city. Here's another animal lair among the ruins, just as was predicted by Bible prophecy. Okay, up to this point of the program, we've mainly been considering the discovery and excavation of the site of Babylon. What I want to do now is look more particularly at what the Bible says about the Babylonian contact with Israel and see how the archaeological discoveries have confirmed that. We read in 2 Kings 24 that Nebuchadnezzar besieged Jerusalem when Jehoiachin was king. He surrendered and he was taken captive to Babylon. His family, officers, princes, and thousands of Jews were taken into captivity with him. Gold from Solomon's temple was also taken, and this all took place around 605 BC. However, we read in 2 Kings 25 that in the first year that evil Merodach became king of Babylon, he released Jehoiachin from prison and gave him a regular allowance of provisions till his death in Babylon. The question is, of course, is this reliable history? Well, in the ruins that you're looking at here in Babylon, 300 cuneiform tablets were found. Upon examination, reference was actually found to Jehoiachin, king of Judah, on 4 different receipts for provisions that had been issued to him. This is one of them here. This confirmed the Bible, which stated that firstly, Jehoiachin was king of Judah, secondly, that he and his family were deported to Babylon, and thirdly, they were given an allowance of provisions. In the year 588 BC, Nebuchadnezzar invaded Israel again. The cities of the southern kingdom of Judah fell, one after another. The last cities to fall were Jerusalem, Lachish, and Azekah, due to being well fortified. We read this in Jeremiah 34, verse 7. Lachish had previously been besieged by the Assyrians, but was rebuilt and fortified. But it suffered the same fate again at the hands of the Babylonians. This here, incidentally, is an artist's impression based on archaeological findings of the ancient city of Lachish. Extensive excavations have taken place there, and significant discoveries have been made. The most significant discovery was 18 letters, now known as the Lachish letters. They were found among the ashes and charcoal in the guard room adjoining the outer gate of the city. These are some replicas of the letters here. Each one was a fragment of a clay pottery vessel. Potsherd is the technical name. On each of them was a message inscribed in an iron base ink. The letters were written in ancient Hebrew, and they were from Hoshea, commander of a Jewish garrison stationed at an outpost. This Hoshea is actually referred to in the Bible in Jeremiah 42 verse 1 and Jeremiah 43 verse 2. His letters were sent to Lachish prior to the city being besieged by the Babylonians, providing information about posts held by Jewish troops. The messages confirm the biblical references to the Babylonian invasion and a number of other things recorded in the Bible. One of them contains a list of names such as Gemariah, Jaazaniah, Jeremiah, Mathaniah, Neriah, Elnathan, Ahijah, all of which are also mentioned in the Bible. Lachish finally fell to the Babylonians, and Jerusalem was breached in 587 BC and the temple was looted. All the sacred temple vessels were taken to Babylon, along with thousands of Jewish captives, and the city and temple were burnt to the ground. All that the prophet Jeremiah had predicted came to pass. Talking about Jeremiah, in chapter 36 of the book that bears his name, we read that he had a friend by the name of Baruch, son of Neriah, who wrote down messages dictated by Jeremiah. Jeremiah 36 also tells us that the king sent his son Jeremiel to arrest Baruch. Well, would you believe it? The archaeologists found a seal belonging to Jeremiel, and it's on the screen at the moment. It says, to, that is, belonging to Jeremiel, son of the king. But not only was Jeremiel's seal found, but also a seal belonging to Baruch, the man who Jeremiel was sent to arrest. That is Jeremiah's scribe and friend. His seal is on the screen now, and it says, to Baruch Yahu, son of Neriah, the scribe. Another man referred to in Jeremiah 36, who was a friend of Jeremiah and Baruch, was Elishama. He was one of the king's court officials, sympathetic towards Jeremiah and Baruch, and helped protect them from those who weren't sympathetic. Well, this seal, now on the screen, was found during excavation bearing his name. Earlier on, I mentioned that one of the names found in the Lachish letters was Jaazaniah, commander of the Judean army. The seal on the screen at the moment was found bearing his name. It says, Jaazaniah, servant of the king. The seals were used to authenticate documents, and hundreds of them, along with seal impressions, have been found, many of them bearing the names of Bible characters. When the Babylonians set fire to Jerusalem and all of the cities of Judea, the little clay seals were baked hard, preserving them. The seals bring to life, in an uncanny way, Bible characters who have been dead for thousands of years. This provides evidence that demands the verdict that they were truly historical characters, not just fictional names invented by the Bible, as many critics have wanted to believe. After the destruction of Jerusalem, the Babylonians appointed a Jew by the name of Gedaliah to be governor over the Jews who were allowed to remain in the land. We read this in 2 Kings 25, verse 22. Well, the seal that you're looking at belonged to him. Now, about 12 years after Nebuchadnezzar conquered the cities of Judea and Jerusalem, he invaded Phoenicia, which is Lebanon today. Phoenicia had good natural harbours, and the chief cities were Tyre and Sidon, mentioned many times in the Bible and are still there today. You see Sidon and Tyre at the lower part of the map on the screen there. This here is the old section of Sidon, and this here is the new section of the city. The principal seaport was at Tyre, which had two harbours, one on the mainland, the other on an island, 1 kilometre, about 3/4 of a mile, off the coast, as depicted here on the screen. But it doesn't look like that today, as you can see in this aerial picture. The island is no longer separate from the mainland. A causeway built by Alexander the Great resulted in the mainland merging into the island, which was quite an amazing fulfillment of Bible prophecy. The Tyrians were the greatest maritime power in biblical times. They were very active in trade and commerce across the Mediterranean and beyond. This map indicates the extent to which their trading vessels sailed. They went all round the Mediterranean, out into the Atlantic, up to Britain, and down Africa's west coast. This relief was actually found carved on a stone sarcophagus from Tyre and gives an idea of what the ancient Phoenician trading vessels looked like. As a result of her sea trade, Tyre became very rich and arrogant and ended up becoming antagonistic towards Israel. Both the Jewish prophets Jeremiah and Ezekiel prophesied against Tyre because of this, saying that she would be invaded and be conquered by the Babylonians. For example, Ezekiel chapter 26 says this, God speaking, I will bring Nebuchadnezzar upon Tyre. He shall set siege engines of war against your walls. They shall break down your walls and destroy your pleasant houses. And this came to pass exactly as foretold. Nebuchadnezzar invaded and destroyed the mainland city of Tyre. Around about 575 BC, he left the city in ruins. But this was not the end of the nation or their sea trade, because they still had their island fortress and many had fled there for refuge. The island had 2 harbours and its walls were high, and the Babylonians were not equipped to sail across and take it. In this picture, Nebuchadnezzar is depicted standing on the mainland, looking with anger and frustration at the island fortress, which he knows he cannot reach and therefore cannot conquer. So the Babylonians departed, leaving behind them the mainland city in ruins. But the prophecy in Ezekiel 26 didn't only predict this. It went on to say that the ruins and the dust of the city would be scraped from the site, making it as bare as a rock. The prophecy stated the stones of the city would in fact be cast into the sea, making it a place where fishermen could spread their nets to dry, to clean, and to mend. But Nebuchadnezzar didn't do this. So did this mean that only half the prophecy was fulfilled? Did the other half fail? Is Bible prophecy just a sort of a hit and miss affair? Does it win some and lose some? By no means. It's all a question of divine times and seasons. As the saying goes, the mills of God grind slowly but very surely. 1,000 years to man is only one day to God. Several centuries after Nebuchadnezzar, Alexander the Great arrived on the scene, and he lived up to his name, that is Alexander the Conqueror, by setting out to conquer the island fortress of Tyre. He got his soldiers to gather up all the rubble of the mainland city, scraping the site bare as a rock, casting it all into the sea, just as the prophet Ezekiel predicted would happen. Why did he do this? Well, to make a mole or causeway between the mainland and the island as depicted in this diagram. The causeway, of course, acted as a bridge, linking the mainland with the island, enabling Alexander and his army to cross over and attack the island. As a result of building the causeway, sand and silt has built up over it and around it on both sides, forming a peninsula out of the island. In this aerial picture, taken in the 1930s, you can see the peninsula that is formed. Prior to its formation, Ezekiel's prophecy that nets would be spread in this area, that is in order to dry and be mended, well, that prophecy would have seemed rather absurd. But in later times, as the causeway grew it became a very convenient place for fishermen to spread their nets, as you see in this old picture here. And it was obviously a very good place for mending nets. Today, as we saw before, the causeway is covered with buildings. The stretch of water that prevented Nebuchadnezzar from reaching the island is now populated with people and with buildings. The present town of Tyre now stands on the peninsula, but there are a good number of buildings on what used to be the mainland. Here's a closer picture of what used to be the island and the peninsula. I'm sure the ancient king of Tyre, not to mention Alexander the Great, would be very impressed with this. This higher picture highlights the coastline, which travels unbroken now around what used to be an island. Ruins are still visible on the mainland at Tyre today, but they belong to the Roman and Crusader periods, which were well after Nebuchadnezzar's and Alexander's time. I'll show you some more of these ruins while I explain something. In Jeremiah and Ezekiel's prophecies concerning Tyre, not less than 25 separate details are given, each of which literally came true in the following centuries. Mathematicians have estimated, according to the law of compound probabilities, that if a prophecy concerning a period or a place or event has 25 details beyond the possibility of human calculation, collusion, collaboration, comprehension, and coincidence, there's only one chance in more than 33.5 million of it being accidentally fulfilled. Yet Tyre's history at the hands of Nebuchadnezzar, and then centuries later at the hands of Alexander the Great, was an amazing fulfillment of these prophecies. Nor could any other city in the world's history have fulfilled them. The authenticity of such Bible prophecy leaves absolutely no chance or excuse for denial. Because of these amazing prophecies concerning Tyre, the place is a popular attraction, especially to Bible-believing tourists who usually end up walking on the causeway, looking at fishermen's nets spread there. It's not very often that you can put your feet on a fulfillment of Bible prophecy and walk on it. Coming back to Nebuchadnezzar, he died around 562 BC, about 13 years after his invasion of Tyre. He was succeeded by several other kings. The Babylonian records say that Nabonidus was the last king of Babylon, and he is depicted on the screen here. This still was found of him standing before the symbols of the Babylonian moon god. And this tablet also records the reign of Nabonidus up to the fall of Babylon in 539 BC. However, the Bible says in the book of Daniel that Belshazzar was the last king. And on the surface, it looked like secular history contradicted Bible history. The Bible critics made a big thing of this, and they claimed that the whole book of Daniel had no historical foundation and was just the figment of someone's imagination. One eminent German critic actually wrote a book to this effect. But long before Babylon was even excavated, vital information in relation to this matter was contained on the small barrel cylinders which were found on the ziggurat at Ur, south of Babylon. When the cylinders were deciphered, it was discovered that the inscription had been written at the command of Nabonidus, describing work on the ziggurat at Ur. Nabonidus set out to repair and restore the old temple tower which had been neglected, and he commemorated it by recording it on the clay cylinders. A portion of the inscription is printed out here. One section of it is a prayer for the long life and good health of Nabonidus himself, but not for him only, but also his eldest son and heir, whose name is given. And guess who that was? None other than Belshazzar. This was proof positive that Belshazzar was not an imaginary or fictitious person, as the critics were claiming. Other clay cylinders and Babylonian tablets confirm that Nabonidus was a lover and a restorer of ancient things, and he left his son Belshazzar in charge of Babylon while he went away throughout his empire on restoration expeditions. So it was no figment of the imagination when the Bible referred to Belshazzar as ruler of Babylon. In Daniel 5 verse 16, we read that Belshazzar, in offering Daniel the highest rank possible, offered the position of third highest ruler. This is quite consistent with the history at the time. Nabonidus was first, Belshazzar was second, Daniel could only be offered third place. Belshazzar, as we know, was a bad, arrogant character, and under his misrule, the empire weakened. Over a century beforehand, the Bible prophet Isaiah declared that a Medo-Persian alliance would conquer Babylon at a particular time. That is, at a time when the Babylonian hierarchy would be given over to an orgy of pleasure. And this came to pass, as predicted, during the night of Belshazzar's feast, which is recorded in Daniel chapter 5. A Persian by the name of Cyrus led the victorious armies into Babylon, and an amazing prophecy was given concerning this in Isaiah chapter 44 and 45, which mentions Cyrus by name about 200 years before he was even born. Amazing. The prophecy in Isaiah also stated that Cyrus would sign a decree to allow the Jewish captives at Babylon to return to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple there. And of course, the book of Ezra records the fulfillment of that. This clay cylinder found at Babylon records how Cyrus took the city of Babylon and allowed exiles to return to their homelands. It's known as Cyrus's cylinder. Under Persian rule, the centre of government shifted east of Babylon to Susa in Elam, that's Iran today. Babylon continued as a prosperous city of the Persian Empire until 480 BC. In that year, in retaliation for a Babylonian rebellion, Xerxes, the king of Persia at the time, destroyed the city's walls and temples. Still, the great city survived, and when Alexander the Great returned from his conquest of Asia in 323 BC, he intended to make it the eastern capital city of his new empire. But it was not meant to be. The word of prophecy was against it, and he died the same year in Babylon of a fever in his 32nd year. His successor, Seleucus, abandoned Babylon, and in 312 BC built a new city to the north called Seleucia. Millions of bricks were taken from Babylon for the building of this new city. It was the beginning of the end for Babylon. The Euphrates River, which had run through the centre of Babylon, changed its course, and the inhabitants drifted away. Builders from up and down the Euphrates have carted away thousands of tons of building materials as well. A huge dam was built at Hindai, and for this, bricks from ancient Babylon were also used. Babylon has truly been spoiled, that is, stripped, robbed, and plundered, and lost her glory, just as the biblical prophets predicted she would, declaring that, quote, the spoiler will be spoiled. Her conquerors carried off her huge treasures of gold, in addition to the countless bricks taken, and archaeologists have removed the city's archaeological treasures to museums around the world. The large skeleton of the old metropolis lies broken and half buried in the solitude of the Iraqi desert. Everything predicted by the biblical prophets concerning the city has been fulfilled right down to the last detail. And this, of course, gives credence to the claim made by the Bible that it is a more sure word of prophecy to which we would do well to pay attention. Today, despite the restoration attempts that have taken place in Babylon, its desolation remains complete. Once the centre of the ancient world and the glory of kingdoms, it now serves as a moving reminder of the impermanence of man's cities and kingdoms, glory and power. It also serves as a reminder of the futility of putting hope and confidence in man. There's only one kingdom that shall be eternal and never destroyed. It's not man's, it is God's. As we read in Daniel 2, verse 44 here, in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever. This is the kingdom that our Lord Jesus Christ is going to set up upon earth when he returns. And that is why he said in the prayer that he taught his apostles, you should pray, thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth, even as it is in heaven.